Hey everybody. I'm Xin. I'm based in Copenhagen, Denmark. I am an independent consultant. I have, something called domain-driven design and sociotechnical architecture as the main thing in my toolbox. My background is a computer scientist. I'm classically trained in computer science, so this talk is basically really about complexity awareness and my sort of some of the experience reports I have about how I have worked with these in the creating a kind of a complexity awareness in the jobs that I have done for companies and for clients. And so I'm asking you to engage with what I'm saying lightly. Uh, I'm these are some of the learnings, and I unlike Sonia, I'm by no means a complexity expert, but I do feel that there is some kind of uh, sort of a high cognitive load in this slide because truth be told, I didn't have time to make the presentation short. So I might have to skip a big chunk with your permission, but let's see how where this leads us, right? So yeah. So I'm gonna skip the first slides, the content part of it, because you've already heard about this in Sonia's talk. And I don't know, I think there are three things I seem to have coordinated with her. You will see a lot of, repetition. So I'm just gonna skip. And this is not new for this community. I realize everybody's aware of the difference between complicated and complex, unlike the tech world I am from. So I'm also gonna skip this. With the just one thing that complexity, in my understanding, is in the relations. You know, what's complex is the relations and the relations being complex, making the parts more complex, whereas complication is more like in the parts, right? If you can solve the complication in the parts by divide and conquer algorithm, you have solved the complication. So basically, because that's kind of important going forward, and then, causality and emergence in the two worlds. So the first analogy I want to bring up is actually Dave Snowden's. So in his 2008 paper, where he actually published the concept of Cynefin. The examples he used for complicated systems is actually a Ferrari, and the one he used for a complex system is a Brazilian rainforest, sort of like Sonia's jungle. Right? So it's a kind of a nice coincidence. Right. So I guess if a lot of us are working with software, either as coaches or directly as techies like me. So is a software system more of a complex or complicated system? This might be a question not so easy to answer. At first sight, you might say, oh, of course, it's just like a Ferrari, right? But then, if we, having worked with software organizations for a while, if we look at our work, it seems that it's a social system with sort of technical subsystems embedded as parts. This is my current mental model of sociotechnicity. In my earlier talks, I tend to, show a picture of juxtaposed social and technical systems, almost like a Venn diagram with two circles intersecting each other. But my view has basically changed. And what this means to me is that, technical systems, in the sense that those we work with, they are not thermostats in our homes, like closed system. The business software usually is an open system, right? We want to make changes to it. Otherwise, we don't need agile, right? So in a way, these being embedded within this organization that is creating these software systems, these software systems sort of take on these complex traits of the social system, right? So if you think about this, what we call technical debt, it's almost like the technical system is taking on a kind of a mischievous, uncontrollable, predictable behavior of the social systems enclosing it. right? And then, when we make decisions about technical systems, you can have all the expertise in the room. You can have the, product people, business people, technical people, and yet, sometimes it's so difficult to make a decision that in concert with each of their, perspectives. And also, I've just I'm in the middle of a client assignment. We're just witnessing how the users sort of repurpose different fields in an IT system to form relations between an organization and some contractual documents because their IT department, the engineering teams, have rejected this service request or change request, right? So you see all these kind of entropy in the technical systems that is sort of a result of these, elements of complexity creeping into the technical system. So therefore, I think technical systems are either complicated or liminal. So in Dave's original concept, liminal is kind of this in-between state, right? So between the complex and complicated. And so practices like CI/CD, containerization, TDD, that sort of thing, it's like we try to push the technical system back to the complicated side, like a Ferrari. But we don't always succeed because of this enclosure situation. This is how I see it right now. And so I work with this thing called domain-driven design, right? So there we talk about, socio-technical, so the social complexity and technical complication. So are you able to see my mouse? I hope so, right? So I'm pointing at
Yes.
this lower. Yeah, right. Thank you. So the technical complications. So if, to be honest, if we really take it from the software engineering perspective, the software components. Now here I have the example of an order component, kitchen component, delivery, sort of in a food domain. They better be separated. If they stay that way, they will be maintainable because there's no relation between them. But then the social complexity means they have no value if they're not connected. That means, a customer has to bring the order to the kitchen, and when the kitchen is ready, they have to kind of call the delivery by phone and then maybe fax them or whatever. That's not good. So the business side of the social complexity, in my eyes, are twofold. So we have the business complexity, right? This is kind of the requirement. This is, and then we have the organizational complexity. This is the social system we talked about. So there you can say, okay, the order and kitchen domains, subdomains, well, we can give them to one team because, this is kind of internal. The delivery software is kind of an integration component. We'll give it to this team that talks with the external delivery team, whatever, right? So you make that kind of decision. So Matthias Varese, he's had this very well-known saying in the DDD community. From an engineering perspective, software wants to be decoupled, right? In this first situation, three isolated bubbles. From a business perspective, software wants to be deeply connected, and this is a fundamental friction that DDD wants to, attempts to address, right? So, but then you know, DDD is not the manicure. The DDD's design goal, we have to be true to what it is. It's the quality of technical systems. So when we do design, we need to ask ourselves, what is the goal of our design? So if the quality of the software, in my eyes, it's mostly about being useful, true to the business requirements, and maintainable from a technical perspective. So the way DDD is doing this is by aligning the solution space to the problem space above, using these patterns called, ubiquitous language, bounded context, and so forth. So if we map that to Kinevin, it's kind of trying to push the problem space to the more complicated side, right? Ubiquitous language, it means that those business concepts, they figure in our daily conversations about decisions, but you can also find them in code. So in a way, they sort of reduce these patterns help us, align this technical complexity with the social complexity. But then the organizational complexity in DDD is sparsely addressed by context mapping patterns, collaborative modeling practices, but it still as a support for producing software. Not, it's a means to an end, not as an end by itself. That's as a DDD consultant, that's how I see it. And I think that's fair enough for the DDD gurus as well. But then who's going to take care of the organizational system, right? Because we now have legacy organizations struggle with legacy systems. Every business is a software business. We have this compounding socio-technical complexity, and the social, remember, is being twofold, the business and the organizational. So I think personally, I love Agile. I think Agile is it is a complexity awareness even before Cynefin is coined. I think Agile is a mindset that is designed, that was born to help us build the Ferrari and survive the jungle. So if you think about these two manifesto, the responding to change and the working software is really, I think Matthias mentioned it, we really have to be technically skilled, right? It's kind of a technical aptitude. If you want to respond to change in a proper way, you have to be good at these. You have to make your code testable. You have to have regression tests. You have to have feedback loops. You have to have automation, containerization, all this, right? This is kind of the basis to say, okay, and now we can redirect our human attention on individuals and interactions, customer collaboration, humans talking to humans, dealing with the social complexity. So I think this is really fantastic. So uh, it right now I've been usually my people who hire me to do as their consultant usually um, ask me to lead a kind of a frontline work to a sort of a transformation combined with agile transformation and to deliver fundamental changes. And here's an example. This is an inverse Conway initiative I was part of. Here you see three feedback loops. It's all about increasing software delivery speed with, the Emer's Conway APIs and aligning team structure with the target architecture, with DevOps and engineering maturity, and then also with the agile, right? So this kind of transformation is complex, right? So it's nobody said it's a walk in the path, but because this is complex stuff, so let's try to do it the first time. This is, this is kind of a visualization of a story Kent Beck talked about in an interview in 2023. And so usually in this kind of a transformation initiative, you see this kind of narrative, right? The executive said, we need a transformation strategy. Then the sales director said, we need to finish the market survey first. Oh yeah, the product director said, the product North Star needs to be there first as well. What about the target architecture? Said the head of architecture. Of course, that has to be there. Otherwise, you can't do the Emer's Conway, right? But then user research, wireframes. Oh yeah, all those dependencies, but no worries. We can do all those upfront PI planning and roadmaps, and then we can iterate, right? So what does it look like? This is totally waterfall is back, right? This is what Ken Bax is saying. Is he refuses these days to talk about agile even, right? He's one of those guys that started the first agile movement, and so I guess I don't have to rant about this. We all know this. We talked about this, and this is asking this question is like underestimating your intelligence. Are organizations working with software more like, you know, jungles or Ferraris? Yeah, I don't have to ask you to reply to that. But then organizations working with software are often managed as Ferraris or jungles. I think we also sort of have an intuition about that. But then, you know, we know I don't want to I don't want to say that people are like not complexity savvy or anything. Most of us would acknowledge that social systems are more complex, uncertain, and unpredictable. But then everywhere we look, we have social interventions like this, right? We have analytical divide and conquer. This is a real governance process in a corporate change initiative I've been participating in. So you break the strategic pillars into themes, and then themes into initiatives, initiatives into epics and stories, and then you just execute that, right? So I think a lot of us working in big organizations can recognize this kind of a tree-like cascading structure. So I think as human beings, it hurts to think of our work as a Brazilian rainforest, a randomly evolving mess of emergent relations that keep changing, right? So the traits of complexity, like Sonia was hinting as well, they are anxiety inducing. This is like our primitive brain. It's like this is a tiger in the height. If we're in the Jurassic age, right? Our human brain is hardwired to fear the uncertain, the uncontrollable, the unpredictable. So this is part of our humanity, even. And then, so even though we know our organizations are jungles, it actually comforts us to think of them as complicated systems. They have many moving parts, but it's anyway predictable, plannable, and controllable. So we see this big, big fascination as I see it. I'm a big fan of team topology, but I think team topology has been used to divide and conquer human communications as decomposable APIs. It's kind of like being used in a mechanistic way. Structurally and the dynamics part is kind of being overlooked. And I think this is Steve Pearson, and this is kind of like this is sort of psychologically. I think our fascination with planning and process is a collective defense against our existential anxiety about uncertainty. Even even if we don't love those big hairy plans, reality gets more complex and it triggers our stress response and we can't step into the future without a plan, right? So we need plans to break down big problems into manageable parts, and then we need processes to align the parts back together. So plans and processes, they make us feel safer, in control, on the same page. That's how they make me feel sometimes. And so back to this picture. And I think we all want our roles to be clearly defined. Clearly definition of roles. It's kind of even agile coach can't say, can't resist that, right? But then I think even when our roles are clearly defined, we can feel alienated by the parts we play, right? The people in the plan in the executing roles can feel alienated about not knowing the big picture, not knowing the product context, and the ones in the planning roles, the managers, the executives, are also having anxiety about the plans might not work next time, just like last time, right? So this kind of anxiety, and it's like in the large scale agile practices I've been part of, uh, we we really have this big divide between, on one side, a very optimistic, mechanistic, divide and conquer kind of an operating model, and on the other side, a kind of a skepticism, pessimism, learned helplessness, especially about the dehumanizing aspect of agile frameworks. um, I don't think it's like some of us on the left-hand side and others on the right-hand side. I think there is a little bit of both sides in all of us, in me as well. So I think we can all collude to downgrading the social complexity to technical complication, and we can all at the same time feeling alienated about doing that. So it's, for me, an existential paradox we just have to live with. So the absurdities, then we can say that I am complexity aware, but then I can still go out and preach we need predictive planning. Do these things harmonize, right? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Yeah, so we see a heavyweight, overweight on the agile reality being predictive and process first, and whereas the original agile values being, adaptive planning, people first, right? The human freedom and agency. So for me, it's kind of like we are overcomplicating but under complexifying, right? The overcomplicating part is about overusing of processes, and the under complexifying. So remember, what I was emphasizing, at least this is my model, what is being complex are the relations. So if we overlook the relations and overcomplicating the parts, divide and conquer, and assuming, the relations would then just somehow work, then I think we're under complexifying, right? So, and let me share a personal story from the DDD story. So this is as DDD people, everybody goes out and do this thing called event storming. I think even maybe a lot of you in the Agile community have also seen this thing. This is a fantastic integrative workshop format to allow people to share their knowledge, to see the forest and the trees. And one of the most well-known use cases of event storming is to, decouple big ball of mud, monoliths, distributed monoliths. And this picture is kind of every event stormer's nirvana, right? So this is kind of like the perfect color distribution. All the hotspots have been solved. And now we can, easily divide the event storm canvas into mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive bounded contexts, right? So who doesn't love this, right? So, but in reality, we often get this. I blurred this out because this is the partial result of an event storming workshop I facilitated last year at a client. In certain places, the most critical places, we don't even have white space enough to add a single hotspot. So it's so messy, right? So, and I remember after this workshop, I was sort of full of shame and guilt and embarrassment about this because I was a facilitator and I was ashamed that I was not able to produce to my client the picture that I think they deserve, which is this one. So when my stress response is triggered, it's so easy to go for this, right? To go for a premature convergence anyway. Because even though I know that this means some important conversations are still missing, this still calms my nerve, right? So this is like, this gives people the reassurance that the workshop has produced output. It has added value, right? So but then, in the context of architecture modernization, also known as splitting the monolith, going for premature convergence like this could lead to result like this, right? You have the monolith on the left hand side, and then they have this intra-process communication, but then after that they become two bounded contexts, become two maybe microservices, and then they now communicate using REST APIs, maybe JSON over HTTP, and then we consider them decoupled and modernized because contract-based coupling, that's the lowest form of coupling, right? So, but then if we look at the data passing, it hasn't changed, and except it's over network performing much worse. The logical coupling hasn't changed at all, right? So, in my consulting experience, once I have, I've in my one of the last architecture reviews, there was a API call chain, a nested API call chain that is 12 layers deep with a lot of those DTOs, serializing, deserializing over the wire, passing all those overlapping data back and forth, right? This is our beautiful compound context. Of course, we can further decouple with event-driven architecture. And then now when cloud repatriation is a thing, maybe we should go back to modular monolith and try some other trendy thing like micro front end, back end for front end, or maybe the actor model. This is what we're doing. So how did a discovery workshop? So event storming is a discovery workshop format. Discovery by definition. So if you can plan what you can discover, it's not a discovery workshop, right? So how did those discovery workshop become legitimate containers for fixed outcomes, right? What led us to prematurely converge on superficial boundaries? What kept us from the deep conversations about logical coupling and social boundaries and power distribution? So here is a confession from a DDD consultant. We cannot find optimal software boundaries just with event storming in a complex domain with ever-changing business logic. And so the second absurdity I put forward here is we know discovery is open-ended, and still we can't help expecting from it a fixed outcome. And so maybe we should undercomplicate a little bit and complexify a little more, using the retrospective, start doing this. But then I think this also begs the question of what is the goal? What is the ultimate goal of social design, also known as OD and D, organizational design and development? In DDD, as I've mentioned, Social system design with those patterns is a mean, so that's a means to an end. We want to adapt the social system to the optimization of the technical system and the business system, right? It's kind of a nuisance we just have to bear with. But then I think in real socio-technical design, we've got to treat social systems' own well-being as a design goal in itself. Because if we don't do that, because of the embeddedness, the social systems messiness will eventually penetrate. And if there is no such thing as no design. Right? So we will end up with a bad design. No design is by definition bad design. So maybe we should upgrade the goal of social design, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. So coming to the solution space, what is complexify? The first step for me is to experiencing the questions. And this is Jacob Needleman. He passed away 2 years ago, I think. It's philosopher. Our culture has generally tended to solve its problems without experiencing its questions. And our most beloved Socrates, let the questions be the curriculum of our time, of our life. And this is a confirmation that this just happened like last month in December. While I was doing all these workshops, event storming, all these workshops, format, frameworks, models, whatever you like, people were asking for a no format, free discussion. Like no Como technique beats a free flowing, expensive discussion, right? Sometimes. And, in the temperature polling, they confirmed this perception. So why is that? I think in some of those collaborative modeling techniques, what those techniques by themselves are, trying to bring into the foreground of the attention is problem solving. And the elephant in the room is those undiscussables, like social underpinnings, my doubts, my concerns, and that sort of thing. So I think we have to upgrade our collaborative modeling to reflective conversations. And we not only have to make the implicit explicit, but also we have to make the undiscussable discussable. So the undiscussables oftentimes have something to do with shame and guilt about not knowing enough, and anxiety and fear about if I speak up, would I be excluded from the group? And even blame and resentment, just unvalidated assumptions about people you're just not telling anybody about, right? So what questions can set us free and set our software free from social coupling, right? What are the questions we're not asking ourselves that can give us true encapsulation, not passing all those data around? Because that's social coupling. Is it because the team boundaries are fixed? I'm not answering those questions because the real good questions, those we not only have to ask because the model says we should, but also need to experience before solving those problems are those personal questions, emotional questions, and open-ended questions that oftentimes have no clear answers. And I think when I started my facilitation career, I was often told, oh, don't get too personal. Don't put people on the spot. Psychological safety, but more and more I've found out if you don't get personal, if you don't get the emotional things out, you're getting nowhere. Because, like Peter Block is saying, if you can't say no, your yes has no meaning, right? So, the questions that are really powerful for me is what matters to you? What matters to you? Why is it important for you to show up today? And, what's my place in the story? Like the big strategy. What's my place in the story? Can we have a discussion about this? What doubts do I have, right? Well, I often ask my clients, what doubts do you have working with me, right? What's the price am I willing to pay? So these are deeper questions. The reason why Needleman said we need to experience this. This is just like when Socrates stopped people in that Greek square to ask them, what does it mean to you to be a father, right? And then he wouldn't let the person go before, they have explored the question back and forth. Such a basic question. And so this is kind of an example about the implementing those experiencing questions in our architecture enabling team. How it just the question, this is their daily stand-up prompts, having reflective conversations. How are we doing with work? How are we being as a team? How are we feeling about the big picture? Does the whole story hang together for you? Do we feel heard, and do we feel the leadership covered? And so these are deeper questions. It's not like every those 15 minutes every day we go through them, but then we pick those questions that mean something, that matter to us on that particular day, because we have to go out and enable the others, right? So these are the questions we have to have a deep experience about. So, what is happening about what is happening in those questioning things? So, some complexity theory have digged up. So, this is Humberto Maturana, a Chilean complexity scientist and biologist. He also unfortunately passed away in 2021. So, what happens is that conversations complexify through languaging and emotioning. What I say in an open conversation, he said, is an invitation to participate with the others in a domain of experiential coherence. And so, um, what is saying? So Maturana's basically he defined love as the act of seeing another as the legitimate other. And that means in a working session, we just have to acknowledge another person's humanity before we engage with him or her in an intellectual exchange. That's what this piece is about. So when that is happening, then each and every one of us can feel this thing called experiential coherence, aka social experience of coherence, social coherence, right? I'm contextually informed. I feel seen and heard and understood. I feel connected with the others in co creation, and I am powerful in making my contribution to the whole. And so when this happens, people are kind of like in tune with a shared mission. And in that moment, I am ready to change my deep-seated mental model. And so this is what's meant by the system changes itself in open reflective conversations, because the mental positions become changeable in the moment, because of the perceived experiential coherence. I don't know about you. I have been to sessions like this, but then sometimes when the day has passed, 2 days later, I was just, what did I feel? I want that feeling back. I'm not feeling that anymore. Where did it go? Right? And then this leads me to the next piece of complexity theory. This is about enabling constraints from Alicia Guerrero. And this is about, those sociotechnical patterns about catalytic and feedback. So what happened in those question experiencing is that we redesigned the itinerary of information. So the relation between the information and the individuals needing this information to make a decision. That those are enabling constraints that are generative, and they make the system cohere in such a way they complexify, they create new relations. So in this sense, complexity is a good thing. New connections make the system more resilient. And so then they become constitutive constraint. Constitute means make something, right? So if the enabling constraints make the coherence coalesce, the constitutive constraints make the system stabilize, and then they become, in the end, system-wide architecture, social architecture that is governing constraint that becomes the whole system's experiential coherence. This is the design goal. And this is kind of like a software interface. I design a capacity for reflection as an enabling constraint, and I allow multiply realizable local realization of it. But then what we model in social systems is not certainty, is not causality, but probability. Alicia called this the conditional probability of new relations forming between individuals, between parts, between information that is fed back into the system and those individuals working with this. So in social system, the leverage is in the paradoxes because the social systems are predictably unpredictable and unpredictably predictable. There is a slowness to it. It's not a random mess, right? Because there is stability. So we use the constraints framework to find the sweet spot, and we don't always find it. You can't control this because variability is the thing that can make this work. I think I have to skip the whole next section, which is about change smuggling. I'm just going to give you this one slide. This is about sometimes I introduce myself as a change smuggler. And because what people hire me to do is the left-hand side, usually. This is technical improvement, improving software quality. But what I tap most of my energy from is actually the thing on the right-hand side to, to cultivate a kind of collective change capacity. And so this is kind of a positive side effect of the left-hand side, right? So and it's kind of like people would pay for the snake oil that I sell with DDD and architecture written on it, but then they get the positive side effect for free. That's why I call myself a change smuggler. And this is my theory of change. And the next section is about how do I work with clients with a different orientation than myself. Using DDD as a process, this one I just have to say, why smuggle? Because I'm classically trained in the zoo. I think like a zooster, right? This is like I coordinated with Sonia, but I haven't. And when I'm in the jungle, I feel like this. Any gym here to do the reps for my jungle skills? There isn't. So when I do this smuggling, I feel I'm undercover. I feel safer. So I have these Trojan mice I can deploy sometimes even inside the Trojan horses. And then, these are basically the safe to fail change probes. And these are some of them. I don't have time to go through these examples, so I'm gonna skip all of it because my time is really running. And sometimes I'm out of a jungle and tossed into Africa, right? So my jungle skills no longer work, and I have to enable something else. So the last bit I want to cover in this talk. I know you're all tired.
So,
This is
Sin,
kind of like
just maybe
information.
to give you, you don't have to like, I've created a little buffer. Nick doesn't start till in 15 minutes. So if you feel like you want to go back with some of this stuff, um,
Okay, thank you so much.
just so you don't feel the pressure,
Uh,
there is a little bit of a buffer here. So, and I said,
uh,
I'll give you 1 minute back. Maybe I'll give you a few more, but
okay. Okay, cool. Let me just use one example. So let me give you one example of my Trojan mouse, a Trojan mouse. Okay, just a little voiceover. Why Trojan mice? Because these are small probes, these are small experiments, right? Some of them can penetrate small mice, they bite into the territory. Some of them might succeed and others might die trying. But we have many of them. I'm not so I won't feel so defeated if some of them just die trying, right? So it's kind of that kind of a metaphor. So this mouse is about generative collaboration. In some of the workshops, we can see that, people are making moves. This is David Cantor's four players model. This is about the four different roles in a working session. So I often observe in the workshops, you make a move, you make a different move. We put everything, on the board, a lot of sticky notes. In the end, a workshop can end up with a lot of colorful sticky notes, but then we haven't touched the real deep issues and we haven't touched the elephants in the rooms. And it's like those are like kind of superficial collaboration. So this model is really asking us to reflect upon, What is that role I am embodying? Am I making a move? Am I following a move? Am I observing a move? Am I opposing a move? So if one of those roles is missing, then the collaboration is not kind of generative, right? So it's kind of like the conflicts. This model is also about seeing conflicts as something good and necessary, and in that moment allow something larger to emerge that is much better and a more insightful than any one of us can bring into the game. So the way I've used it to smuggle in, so this is a workshop. How I have used it is this is a 2 week discovery sprint last year at a client. So this is a virtual workshop, 2 week, and in the beginning, so I just asked the group to check in about, what's your default mode in group work, and then this is anonymous voting, and then at the end of the workshop, what has been your primary mode in the past 10 days in this workshop, and then have a conversation about this. And I think in this workshop, people kind of acknowledged we did touch upon the elephants in the room because we have all the roles covered and there are opposers, observers, movers, and followers, right? So this is just one of those things, right? So yeah, so this is one example. So these are the closing slides. I think I'm comfortable within time. And sometimes when we are out as the complexity aware people, like the coaches, like the DDD enablers, architecture enablers, I think what we can often get caught in is that we're busy being the enabler and making the others the enablees. And I gradually discovered enabling complexity awareness is not an achievement course for an overachiever like me. Because I can't see how things are if I'm too focused on how they ought to be. If I'm only focusing on where I can apply DDD and Canavan, I will not keep my genuine wondering for the client's unique context and challenge. And that therefore that unique solution is out of my field of vision as an enabler. So the questions I experience as a chief architect and in recent years as a consultant is, can I both be the person with the expert knowledge and the person with so much understanding and compassion for the client's unique situation that I am ready to declare the irrelevance of all that knowledge in their context? How can I help people create a story they can all feel belonging to in this room? And for me, how do I balance the life that works with a life that counts? And basically, that's how can I take a piece of work that the client wants to pay me for and still smuggle some of those things that I think will really work in their context, but they just don't know. And I don't want to force anybody to subscribe to my model. And so sometimes I just have to say, I need to hold on lightly to my favorite model, and I have to be ready to kill my darlings. So the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard said, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. I don't always remember this, but I think the change of our time requires our full humanity. The rational man is not the highest being on the evolutionary ladder. We need to learn these models. We need to sharpen our skills. That's probably the shoe in the shuhari. But we also need to find out how we can learn together in the messiness and without. I think it's the final engaging the heart and the mind and staying with the complexity. And so sometimes this is a hard piece I've learned that getting stuck is as interesting as getting unstuck. Sometimes I just have to say to people, this is a teenage language. I don't know. What do you think? Right? That's hard for an expert that is being hired. What are we paying you for if you say, I don't know, what do you think? Right? But every time I feel like I have to imagine myself happy because it's not the same hill and not the same woman up the hill. We have to experience questions in our time and keep profiting from the paradoxes. Even though I don't like social medias, I just have to brag about what I do on LinkedIn, on whatever, right? Because otherwise, how can I influence? How can I increase my influence? So this is what I do. This is the demand of our time. But then this is really the end of the end. I think uncertainty is a superpower and incoherence is an opportunity. I think in the software community, we often see incoherence as a penalty. But I don't know if you know this 2022, the bear. I love the bear. This is when Carmi asked Chef Terry, what would you tell your younger self if you are like me, just starting your restaurant business? And Chef Terry said, I think I'll tell myself that you have no idea what you're doing, and therefore you're invincible. I think we're all invincible, but we are at an important edge. Our rich and messy work is a challenge, but also an opportunity because complexity means we need to work this out together. And we need to develop this collaborative change capacity and agility in the social system we're part of. And this final reflection is a little bit far out, but I just feel I just have to share it because in recent years, smuggling change has made me aware that crafting software can be developmental and reparative. Because maybe software design and modeling is just an excuse to experience important questions no one has time for otherwise. And maybe software development, in all its complexity and yearning for agility, is just an excuse for humans to find our way back to each other. And working together with complex software in complex organizations gives us a valid context to rediscover our agility and humanity. That is it. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank
No,
you,
thank
Sin.
you
That
for
was good.
sharing.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Sin. Any questions, thoughts? This was really exceptional, and it's made me think several times and pause and say, "Wow, I haven't thought about it that way." So, thank you. But we got Nick is here. Hi, Nick. We got about 5 minutes before Nick starts. So, any questions, feedback for Sin?
I have a question for Sin. So one of the things that I have learned about the tech world is you mentioned the personal element and thinking about the people. That's kind of a theme today. But there are companies like Apple and Google that just hire for culture more than I think anything, as a person who's experienced that process and didn't want to be there. Can you talk a little bit about if that's good or bad for companies? Like, what's the ramifications of those kind of behaviors of companies to hire a person that's more a cultural fit than a technical fit?
What do I say about that? I'm the cultural fit. I think it's a human thing and it's a natural thing to do, right? If I'm just thinking, if I'm the executive, the culture that I think is the right one, I would also, attract those people that think like me. Um, so I think that's natural, but I think the world is dynamic. I mean, in recent years, I've read a lot about Buddhism, and I realized that Google and Amazon are not an island because Google and Amazon are embedded in the larger system, and the larger system are impacting each and every um, recruit that they hire as a cultural fit. Eventually, the cultural fits will also get the influence from the outside system. So we don't, I don't think we need to be fatalist for the big techs because the pendulum swings to one side. And even in the United States of America, I mean, you just get this fantastic president. And I think that he is a fantastic opportunity to remind ourselves the preciousness of our humanity. And I am full of hope that these things are here to trigger deeper experiences. So I think it's good. I don't know if I answer your questions, but I just think that way, Patricia.
Uh, Thank you, Sin. I'm also Buddhist, and I also hope that things will be fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, questions?
Jean, maybe I'm ignorant. I don't know a lot of architects that think holistically. Uh, yes, thank you. Um, how does it work for you when you work with fellow architects? What do you discover, or what do they discover from you? How do you find partners? I'm sure you do. I hope you do. But in general, I bet it's a very interesting experience combining these layers. Yeah? Anything interesting to share?
Yes, I think in a moment, you will hear one more architect that is very much, I wouldn't say like me, but we're very in tune. Well, his name is Tune, so I'm sure you're in tune. Uh, sorry, that wasn't even intended. Uh, so yeah, I think in the architect community, we are uh, there is almost a we are generating close to a critical mass to embrace systems thinking, to think in systems and not and think in socio-technical systems. And having said that, I know what you mean. I meet the mechanistically minded architects everywhere because architecture is still a means to an end. There's a long way to go. But I think that the point for me is that still don't try to change people because the energy to change a culture would just make it stronger. You have to the only time I succeeded in changing any architect is when I have worked with them or him or her uh, in a problem sphere, and they feel that I have truly understood the suffering they face, and then they start to be curious about there is a different way of seeing things and working things. So compassion and understanding is the prerequisite for change, not smartness, not insight, not intellectuality. So
Yes.
I don't
If
know.
I may,
Yeah.
no, this is perfect. If I may, I have a same experience as a coach when I work with architects, as profound persons on a technological level. They all are very, very able to understand, for example, this is not my core domain. I respect it, yet I respond to it in my manner. And all of them, in the end, thank me, for example, if I facilitate something, for being able to express themselves. So in the end, we're all in the same pool. It's just a way that we connect the dots might seem like it is dividing us. So thank you for answering. It's very uplifting. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Elena, for great questions. Thank you, Sin, for great presentation. Nick, you're the last one to close it here. We've had a wonderful day. If you ask me, it seems others are enjoying it. They're at least sticking around. So the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.